bloodstream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you. Have a bumper crop of topics to deal with today, more than we usually do. We're going to start with tariffs. What China says versus what China does. Now, recently there's been a lot of news about soybeans. There was a ship, it's called the Pegasus, that was stranded, for lack of a better term, off the coast of China with American soybeans. They were trying to get them there to beat a 25% tariff that China had imposed on American soybeans in response to tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. And there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. This isn't going to happen. They were trying to get them there before the deadline where the tariffs would be imposed. They missed that by mere hours. And there was all kinds of concern about whether or not 70,000 tons of American soybeans would even make it into China, and the affected U.S. soybean growers would miss out on all this revenue. Well, on the 11th of August, CGTN actually reported on what was going on with that cargo ship.
A cargo ship stuck at sea is finally docking at a Chinese port. The Pegasus has been sailing near the coast for over a month, trying to dodge the U.S.-China trade war. The ship missed a deadline to avoid a 25% tariff on the imported goods by just a few hours. CGTN's Xu Shenqin reports from the port in Dalian City in northeastern China.
Right behind me, the Pegasus is unloading its 70,000 tons of U.S. soybeans. The vessel docked around midnight and started offloading the shipment. The vessel was a social media sensation as some media picked it up and reported that it was racing to deliver its shipment before new Beijing tariffs took effect last month. It was expected to arrive on July the 6th, shortly after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed the first round of tariffs on $34 billion worth of Chinese goods. But docking today means the U.S. soybean shipment is subject to a further 25% retaliatory tariff by China. The cargo owner, agricultural commodity trading house Louis Dreyfus, and the Chinese purchaser Sino Grain told us that the ship didn't dock due to a limited warehouse capacity at the port. Due to the escalating trade conflict between the U.S. and China, some firms have increased their orders for soybean imports, causing a temporary congestion at the port. Several vessels were waiting to offload. and China's Sino-Grain said it will pay off the tariffs. The Chinese firm also has to pay additional fees to keep the vessel in the water, but Sino-Grain said it is normal for the purchaser to cover that cost if docking was delayed. Sino-Grain also said that it has already found alternative soybean sources, so it has not yet seen lags in productions or price hikes. Now Chinese firms are sourcing from countries like Brazil and Russia. I've spoken to a few traders and they said while South American countries and countries around the Black Sea have the capacity to fill the demand, there are still logistical challenges, and that's why prices have been slowly going up for Brazilian and Russian soybeans. Some analysts say China still needs to import a relatively small amount of U.S. soybeans to meet its demand. Xu Xingchen, CGTN, Dalian, Liaoning Province.
So the ship docked, the tariff was paid, and the American soybean farmer got his cargo delivered, and he got paid. Now, let's not overlook some of the other things that went on, including, well, we think there's going to be fewer U.S. soybeans bought. Okay, so what? Well, that's going to hurt, okay? Where are they going? Well, they're going to go around the Black Sea. They're going to go around South America. Did you hear the part where there are logistical challenges and the prices of those soybeans are going to go up? Guess what they're going to aim at? They're going to try to aim maybe just short of what they would pay for U.S. soybeans, which they are already accustomed to buying, and there are no logistical problems there. And if there is any reason to believe there is a sufficient drop in quality of those products, guess where they're going to head, since they've already demonstrated that the 25% tariff is not something they can't swallow. Are you starting to figure this out yet? This much ado about nothing. Well, you're trying to say this trade war doesn't mean anything. I'm trying to tell you that there really isn't necessarily a trade war to begin with. What you're seeing is a very open, very aggressive negotiation between two extremely wealthy trading partners, and that would be the U.S. and China. But the bigger deal is there is what China says, and then there's what China does with respect to tariffs. For example, despite all the tough talk, Trump's being fickle, this is very, we don't want a trade war, we will definitely have to answer all this. Are you aware, back on the 30th, China announced that it would cut tariffs on a wide range of consumer goods? That was a Bloomberg report from May 30th. They cut car tariffs in a small offering to the U.S. on trade. That was a New York Times report from the 22nd of May. They're slashing. Oh, wait a minute. This is good. This is good. Tariffs. This is in money.cnn.com. China cuts tariffs for Asian countries. Wow, really? What about German car makers are giddy as China lowers tariffs on cars to 15%. They did that for America too. April 9th, China's Xi promises to open economy, lower tariffs. All this talk about a trade war, and the only thing you can read consistently from China is that they're opening their markets, and to do that, they're also lowering tariffs. Al Jazeera English put this report out on the 1st of July regarding China and trade.
Tariffs are being cut on nearly 1,500 products, ranging from cosmetics to home appliances, clothes and pharmaceuticals. It's seen as a boost for global brands wanting greater access to China's booming consumer market, and a boost for China's consumers, who were promised by President Xi Jinping at last October's Party Congress to be given greater spending power.
Oh, absolutely. This is consistent with the national strategy that improving the quality of life now is a priority, ahead of deleveraging, ahead of the trade war.
But with the threat of a trade war with the United States, China has just released a white paper claiming it's fulfilling its commitments as a member of the World Trade Organization, or WTO, which regulates international trade.
China will continue to seek to improve multilateral trade rules, keep pace with the times and reform the multilateral trading system with other members of the WTO.
Taken together with the tariff cuts, it seems to be sending a message that despite US claims of unfair trade practices, China is playing by the rules. The tariff cuts also serve a wider strategic objective, putting pressure on local producers of low-tech goods such as clothing and cosmetics to become a part of China's broader ambition to be a global leader in high-tech manufacturing. That bold strategy, Made in China 2025, is seen as a major challenge to the technological dominance of the United States, and is arguably one of the reasons behind the US threat of a trade war to thwart China's ambitions. Rob McBride, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
If you were to listen to people like Al Jazeera English and others, you would think that the only two people involved, or the only two countries involved in this, were the U.S. and China. That's not true. There's Germany. Oh, here's another report. China cuts tariffs on imports from South Korea, India, and others. If you know anything about global trade, China has been an aggressive and unwelcome aggressor in global trade for decades. And the idea, we were talking about this back in October. Who was president of the United States back in October 2017? Oh, Donald Trump. Who had multiple conversations with the president of China before October of 2017? Oh, Donald Trump. Do you think it's possible that Donald Trump initiated some of these actions knowing what China was going to do to keep the pressure on them to follow through as they had not in the past? And China is lowering tariffs. They're doing it kicking and screaming publicly, but they're doing it. Not just for the United States, but for other countries as well, which is good for the entire world, and anything that is economically good for the entire world cannot disadvantage the most powerful economy on the planet today. China talks one game, China does another game. Donald Trump understands how to deal with Asians who are looking to save face and not lose face. The American media doesn't seem to understand that game, and the American citizens who pay attention to the American media are not getting an education in what that's about either. Nevertheless, the trade imbalances, or those things that work on them, which is tariffs and restrictions, are starting to normalize under this president. If you don't think that's a good thing, then you don't. But when China starts dropping tariffs, the whole world is celebrating. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, apparently, those with no need to know seems like they will know no longer. As you may be aware of by now, former CIA Director John Brennan had his security clearance revoked by President Donald Trump. The reasons for that were, well, basically, the guy's out there making wild accusations against the current administration and has offered no information, no proof to back it up, and he's kind of using his security clearance to hide behind that. He's also using his security clearance to enrich himself by putting himself out there as an expert on national security affairs, and that claim, of course, is bolstered by a continued access to classified information. Well, not surprisingly, that has been taken to task, and now it's been revoked. Now, Donald Trump didn't come up with this idea on his own. He actually got some information from Senator Rand Paul. It is interesting what his remarks were in looks like this is a Reason.com article from August 17th. Rand Paul says, I urged the president to do this. I filibustered Brennan's nomination to head the CIA in 2013, and his behavior in government and out of it demonstrate why he should not be allowed near classified information. He participated in a shredding of constitutional rights. He lied to Congress and has been monetizing and making partisan political use of his clearance since his departure. If you're going to do that, you don't have a need to know. Let me help you out. This whole idea of professional courtesy, I've had security clearances, and once I no longer had a need to access that information to do my job, that clearance was removed. Not because I did or said anything, but because security clearances are on a need-to-know basis. You don't need to know anything to do what Brennan is doing now. That's interesting. Actually, they talked to Donald Trump about this as he was getting ready to board either Air Force One or maybe Marine One, I can't tell. But they caught this on C-SPAN, and here's what he had to say about the whole idea of revoking clearances, particularly John Brennan's.
Security clearances are very important to me, very, very important, and I've had a tremendous response for having done that. There's no silence. If anything, I'm giving him a bigger voice. Many people don't even know who he is, and now he has a bigger voice, and that's okay with me because I like taking on voices like that. I've never respected him. I've never had a lot of respect. And Senator Burr said it best. If you knew anything, why didn't you report it when you were before all of these committees, including their committee? So he had a chance to report. He never did. This was just came up lately, and it's a disgusting thing, frankly. Look, I say it again. That whole situation is a rigged witch hunt. It's a totally rigged deal. They should be looking at the other side. They should be looking at all the people that got fired by them. All of the people that got fired, they should be looking at Bruce Orr and his wife Nellie for dealing with, by the way, indirectly Russians. They should be looking at Steele. They should be looking at all these FBI guys who got fired and demoted. It's not us. It is a rigged witch hunt. I've said it for a long time.
About that claim that people are making that he's trying to silence his critics, how does not having a security clearance make you silent? I've even heard people go so far as he's somehow violating their First Amendment rights. First Amendment right doesn't mean that no one has a First Amendment right to classified information. Nor is anyone rendered mute or dumb to the point that they cannot speak because they no longer have access to classified information. Well, you're taking the foundation of his comments away. And how would you know that if you don't know the information? How would you know? It's nonsense. This is nothing more than breaking up the swamp's ability to promulgate itself by keeping former members in the know about what the government may be doing to clean that blasted, nasty area. Well, now you can't know. You don't have anything you do now. It's actually illegal for you to have that information, and that's a problem. Back on Wednesday when the revocation was announced, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders issued this statement from the president.
I'd like to begin by reading a statement from the president. As the head of the executive branch and commander-in-chief, I have a unique constitutional responsibility to protect the nation's classified information, including by controlling access to it. Today, in fulfilling that responsibility, I've decided to revoke the security clearance of John Brennan, former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Historically, former heads of intelligence and law enforcement agencies have been allowed to retain access to classified information after their government service so that they can consult with their successors regarding matters about which they may have special insights and as a professional courtesy. Neither of these justifications supports Mr. Brennan's continued access to classified information. Mr. Brennan has recently leveraged his status as a former high-ranking official with access to highly sensitive information to make a series of unfounded and outrageous allegations, wild outbursts on the internet and television about this administration. Any access granted to our nation's secrets should be in furtherance of national, not personal interest. For this reason, I've also begun to review the more general question of the access to classified information by government officials. As part of this review, I'm evaluating action with respect to the following individuals: James Clapper, James Comey, Michael Hayden, Sally Yates, Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr. Security clearances for those who still have them may be revoked, and those who have already lost their security clearance may not be able to have it reinstated.
Let's put another interesting thing to rest. Even if your security clearance is revoked, that is not necessarily a permanent issue. It can be reinstated if there is a need. In this case, we'll see if there is one. If not, then you don't need it. You heard the name Bruce Orr, and a lot of people don't know who Bruce Orr is. He is a Department of Justice official under the Obama administration, carried over into this one, who did not disclose Fusion GPS money that was being paid to his wife. You remember Fusion GPS, the folks who made sure that our good friends could come up with dirt on people. Wow. Orr was demoted from his post after the information was made public. And he didn't tell the truth, and willfully falsifying government documents can result in jail time. So please explain to me why this man would need a security clearance. He's the guy who actually brought the opposition research on President Donald Trump to the FBI and didn't disclose that it came from Fusion GPS and that his wife is getting paid for it. Guys, you can't drain the swamp if you let the alligators that you actually get a chance to remove keep a key. Brennan had no need for a security clearance. If he ever did, there are processes to reinstate it. Didn't need it. That's how you make America great again. You get people out of the know who don't need to be in the know. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida, Talk Radio Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, I came across an article recently that talked about the state of Washington, Trump-proofing its abortion laws, which was the strangest thing I could have ever heard. Because once you really understand more about how the federal government and state government interact on certain things, why would you ever need to do what the state of Washington is doing unless you have something else in mind? Let's go back to the election, shall we? On 16 October, a few weeks before the election, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton came together in a debate, and Chris Wallace, who was moderating, asked a specific question regarding Roe v. Wade.
Right. Mr. Trump, you're pro-life, but I want to ask you specifically, do you want the court, including the justices that you will name, to overturn Roe v. Wade, which includes, in fact, states a woman's right to abortion?
Well, if that would happen, because I am pro-life and I will be appointing pro-life judges, I would think that will go back to the individual states.
But I'm asking you specifically, would you
if
like
they overturned it, it'll go back to the states.
But what I'm asking you, sir, is do you want to see the court overturn? You just said you want to see the court protect the Second Amendment. Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, that will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court. I will say this, it will go back to the states, and the states will then make a determination.
Secretary Glenn.
Well, I strongly support Roe v. Wade, which guarantees a constitutional right to a woman to make the most intimate, most difficult, in many cases, decisions about her health care that one can imagine. And in this case, it's not only about Roe v. Wade. It is about what's happening right now in America. So many states are putting very stringent regulations on women that block them from exercising that choice, to the extent that they are defunding Planned Parenthood, which, of course, provides all kinds of cancer screenings and other benefits for women in our country. Donald has said he's in favor of defunding Planned Parenthood. He even supported shutting the government down to defund Planned Parenthood. I will defend Planned Parenthood. I will defend Roe v. Wade, and I will defend women's rights to make their own health care decisions. And we have come too far to have that turn back now. And indeed, he said women should be punished, that there should be some form of punishment for women who obtain abortions. And I could just not be more opposed to that kind of thinking.
If you can blow past the bluster, here's what it comes down to. Donald Trump simply took a federalist approach. Federal government shouldn't be in this. We should overturn this ruling and let the states make their own decisions. Period. Don't know what the problem is there. The Clinton approach is more globalist. It's more, progressive. Everybody should do it our way. We want women to kill children in the womb. We want all women everywhere to kill children in the womb. We don't want anyone to be able to make a different decision. See, that's democracy. That's kind of why the founding fathers didn't give us a democracy, because they didn't want one person sitting on high making decisions for everyone. That's kind of just, I'm sorry, that's how it is. But Donald Trump made a very important point. Overturning Roe v. Wade sends the matter back to the states, who have to answer directly to the people that live in them. Please explain to me why that's a bad idea. Because the people who would support increased restrictions well above and beyond what Roe v. Wade, that interpretation, that ruling allows states to do, that would have to be supported by the women in the state, wouldn't it? Gee. Okay. Now, the whole idea of trying to protect yourself against Roe v. Wade, if you're a state, for example, or the overturning of Roe v. Wade, Mario Cuomo, governor of New York, made an interesting observation during a campaign rally, it sounded like, back in, this was 11 July, and he made his statements regarding Roe and what he wanted to see done in that state.
For years, what the Republicans in the Senate have said is, well, we don't need a New York law because we have Roe v. Wade. And nobody's crazy enough to try to roll back Roe v. Wade. Yeah, except the man they nominated for President of the United States, who wound up winning the election. But that was always the answer. You don't need a New York law. We have Roe v. Wade. Well, now we know we're not guaranteed of having Roe v. Wade. And the New York law, my friends, does not currently go as far as Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade has the protections that we now rely on in New York. We never passed the New York state law because we relied on Roe v. Wade. And everyone assumed it would always be there, and because the Republicans wouldn't pass it, using that as an excuse. We now need to codify Roe v. Wade, which will actually increase the protections in New York. God forbid they do what they intend to do, which is overturn Roe v. Wade. I want to get it done before the Supreme Court does that, because I don't want any gap in a woman's right to protection, and we have a better legal case when the Supreme Court acts, because I will sue when the Supreme Court acts, and I want the New York state law in place.
So here is my question. What does the New York state law say now? Does it forbid women to get abortion, and the only thing that allows them to get abortions in the state of New York is a Supreme Court ruling, which is not a law, by the way? Matter of fact, there is no federal law on abortion. Okay. But that brings us to Washington State. Washington State claims in the Seattle Times that they have Trump-proofed their abortion laws. But what does that really mean? What it really means is this. There's a 27-year-old state law that's intended to defend abortion rights from challenges at the national level. It's called Initiative 120, and that declared that a woman has a right to choose physician-performed abortion before fetal viability. That's it. The law emerged from a political climate not unlike the current one and was passed narrowly in 1991 by a vote of the people. Okay. The blue states, here's from the article still, like ours, realized we can't really depend on the feds. You know, you never know. We saw the power of the right wing. We saw the power of the Catholic Church and evangelicals. They weren't a political force until the Reagan years. Ooh, here is where it gets interesting. So what they want to do is say we are going to protect ourselves against any action at the federal level by saying before anyone would acknowledge that this is anything other than a blob of cells, a woman can kill that child. Does that argument sound familiar? Because let me help you out. What it was, or let's say it this way, what it is when it's born is what it was when it was conceived. The idea of fetal viability is fanciful. Just because the child can't live outside the womb doesn't mean it's not a child, unless you are an evil-minded progressive. This is very, wow. This, to me, is really about as simplistic as you can get. And I'm not saying that in a fanciful manner, because we have this tendency to forget something very basic. Is anyone unaware that there are no federal laws on abortion? Not in this country. We have an interpretation of the Constitution that simply says states cannot prevent abortions, but they can regulate the practice to varying degrees if they so choose. And recently, over the last decade or so, many states, more than 20, I believe more than 25, have begun regulating abortion more aggressively. There are still states like Washington who basically would rather not regulate it at all. So the states simply can say, well, we can't cut you off, but you can regulate it. And of course, in some places, I believe Texas, or there's some state in the Southwest or the Midwest, where they have regulated it so effectively that they don't have any abortion clinics operating in the state. And someone said, well, that's terrible. I said, not for unborn children, it's not. Based on the way things really are, should a state like Washington desire to render all wombs within its border a free fire zone where only unborn children can be targeted, they can do that whether Roe is in place or not. And in this case, Washington is saying that they've already done that. Only states which desire to make the womb a safe space for unborn children are impacted by the current interpretation associated with Roe v. Wade. Ohio, I know, at least at one time, and they may still be interpreting or contemplating it, a zero tolerance law with respect to abortion. And but it's really not that much difference from the fetal viability law, if I recall. Once a heartbeat is detected or detectable, you cannot abort the kid, period. You cannot kill it. Once we can show that it has a heartbeat and it is alive in that regard, you can't do anything about it, which is really no different than the Washington law, which really means there is no argument here. If Roe goes away, the states make their own decisions. So if and when Roe v. Wade is reversed, it would be no less a federal crime to murder children in the womb than it is now. Why do I say that? Because, and again, there is no federal law regarding abortion. It's not illegal at the federal level to have an abortion. It's a state matter. And overturning Roe v. Wade would simply render abortion legality, or the lack thereof, a determination made by the states. Whether you kill the child or not, D.C. would simply not be part of the equation. So it's disingenuous to indicate that any state could make their laws regarding abortion, either Trump or any other president, proof, because no president has ever had, nor currently has, the authority to set or revise state abortion laws. Now, in truth, if Roe goes away, here's the real deal. In every state, progressives would have to defend their bloodlust regarding unborn children. That's where the problem is. That's why they don't want Roe overturned. They don't want to have all 50 battles because they know they can't win 50. If they can't win 50, and we already know they're probably going to lose at least 25 of them, if they can't do that, their whole argument regarding women's health unravels because they can no longer hide the fact that the people have seen through it. They don't want that. They want the federal government flying top cover for them so they don't have to have those battles. Because as you know, it's hard to win a war if you're fighting on two fronts. In this case, they'd be fighting on more than 50. They don't want that. But you do, if you care about the country and its next generation. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, if you are a homosexual in Colorado, here comes that man again. And by that man, we're talking about Jack Phillips, the Colorado baker who recently had his case where he refused to bake a wedding cake for a homosexual couple that sought to be married. That was decided at the Supreme Court. Back in June, when the ruling came out, CBS affiliate in Denver covered the story in this way.
The United States Supreme Court rules in favor of a Lakewood baker, saying he had the right to refuse to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. That ruling tops our news. I'm Kelly Worthman. The court rules 7-2 in favor of Jack Phillips in the case that started back in 2012. We are covering Colorado first for you this afternoon, and CBS 4 investigator Brian Moss was at the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court back in December. He's joining us now live from Masterpiece Cake Shop in Lakewood. Good afternoon, Brian.
Kelly, it's a very busy Masterpiece Cake Shop as we take a look inside. Baker Jack Phillips inside right now. I spoke to him just a few minutes ago, and he told me it's a crazy day. The phone ringing off the hook, a lot of people congratulating him, giving him hugs, as you see right now on CBS 4. It was a 59-page opinion with Justice Anthony Kennedy writing the majority opinion. The court siding with Baker Jack Phillips, who owns this shop, and his refusal to craft a cake for a gay couple planning to get married. Phillips, the baker, refused to create a cake for the gay wedding, saying it would be contrary to his religious beliefs. The gay couple, Charlie Craig and Dave Mullen, said they were humiliated by that answer, believing it was discrimination, and that began the court case. In today's ruling, Justice Kennedy, who wrote the ruling, said the Colorado Civil Rights Commission was neither tolerant nor respectful of Phillips' religious beliefs. Phillips' lawyer said he's relieved and delighted with the decision, and the religious hostility has no place in society. At the bakery through the morning, customers showing up to express their support for Phillips and the ruling in his favor.
The gay community needs to be treated with dignity and with respect. Discrimination on all forms is reprehensible. But as you'll note, that the courts said hostility towards religious freedom is inappropriate. Neutrality is the appropriate approach. And for that, I'm glad for the court's ruling.
The ACLU, which represented Craig and Mullins, viewed today's ruling as narrow and based on specific concerns about the actions of the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. Supporters of Craig and Mullins have worried that this kind of a ruling might open the door to more discrimination. But you can see Masterpiece Cake Shop very busy today. A lot of supporters coming in, shaking hands, hugging Jack Phillips, and celebrating his victory at the Supreme Court. Covering Colorado first in Lakewood, Brian Moss, CBS 4 News.
Thank you, Brian.
So you understand that there is a glimmer of hope for religious freedom in America. They went after this guy trying to say, you must bake this cake. He said, I can't bake this cake. It's a violation of my faith. And it was a 7-2 decision in his favor. The idea of it being narrow is they're saying, well, it only applied to this specific instance. Of course, that's the same case you could make for a number of rulings, but I digress. Well, one thing that could be predicted, and you kind of heard it in that news clip, was that this was not going to be the last time that Jack Phillips was going to have a run-in with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission on the subject of homosexuality. And lo and behold, back in, let me see, when did this occur? June 2017, which is actually before the court case occurred. We sent somebody else after him, we being the homosexual community, of which I'm not part. They sent somebody else after him to do a different cake and got the same answer. The Fox affiliate in Denver covered that story as it emerges in this way.
Sued Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper and state civil rights officials, claiming Colorado has renewed its religious persecution in an investigation despite the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, Joe St. George joins us on the phone, our political reporter here at Fox 31, with more on this lawsuit, Joe, and the years-long saga that's been going on with this cake shop. What is new today?
Well, the new thing is that really here we go again, Kirk and Megan. This time it's not about a gay wedding cake. It's about a transgender transitioning celebration cake in which Jack Phillips refused to make. This goes back to 2017. And in short, this was, to some degree, we expected Mr. Phillips to be challenged again in some capacity because the Supreme Court ruling was so narrow when it came out a few months ago. It didn't say that Jack had complete authority to do really whatever he wanted. It basically said when it came out, the Supreme Court thought the Colorado Civil Rights Commission in that one instance several years ago was discriminatory. This is a different instance, and now we see what is happening. We see the state of Colorado believing that he must serve a protected class, transgender individuals, and Jack Phillips disagreeing this morning, guys.
So, Joe, I mean, is this a situation where someone was legitimately requesting a transgender cake, or is it someone who was picking a fight, for lack of better words?
Well, with the Alliance Defending Freedom is the attorneys that's been representing Jack, and they have not named whoever was it, but they did say in their release this morning that it was a lawyer, an attorney. Now, that doesn't mean this was meant for it to be the next legal challenge, but it is interesting that they did label it an attorney, and we'll find out more throughout the day. We have been speaking with Jack Phillips' legal team, and they said they do anticipate to make him available for us, so we're hoping to have that for our later newscast today. But again, I'm just reading through this again. It broke in the last few hours here. This is what Jack said to the state. He said he contends that he will not support a message that, quote, promotes the idea that a person's sex is anything other than an immutable God-given biological reality. So Jack's faith, here we go again, right? Deja vu, here we go again. Jack's faith doesn't really believe in the transgender process. As a result, he doesn't want to support this the same way his faith doesn't believe in same-sex marriage.
And exactly, here we go again. This is one thing that you can always say about radical leftists and progressives. They don't lose well. So even after Jack Phillips got a Supreme Court ruling 7-2 in his favor, saying he didn't have to make a homosexual marriage cake, a homosexual lawyer who has gotten themselves medically mutilated to change from one gender to another, calls in 2017, asks for him to do a transgender anniversary cake, and the predictable answer from Jack Phillips is no. It wasn't until June 28th of this year, after the Supreme Court ruling came out, that the Colorado Commission said, we have adequate evidence to believe that you have engaged in discrimination, and we are going to force you to go into immediate mediation about this issue. Well, he sued. Jack Phillips recognized this is a setup. He recognizes what's going on, and he's filing suit now. Is this going to go back to the Supreme Court again? To be honest, it shouldn't. Is it likely to do so? Yeah, it's likely. And this is the interesting thing to me, is that I don't even know why the homosexual community wants this fight. They've already lost on something that is so similar. This is what they call a distinction without a difference. Well, it was a wedding cake. Okay. Well, this is a transition cake. This is a homosexual cake or a homosexual cake, and he does not do cakes that celebrate in any way, shape, or form homosexuality. You cannot say that it's okay for him to not make a wedding cake, but then say he must make another cake that celebrates homosexuality in a different form. I don't see how you're going to get there. They're going to try, and they're going to keep trying. But the problem they have is religious liberty is actually enshrined in the Constitution. But the idea that others need to accept your gender confusion, well, that's not quite in the Bill of Rights or anywhere else. So if this case wanders back to D.C., then Jack Phillips will likely prevail by some other narrow margin, like 8-1 or 9-0. Personally, I think homosexuals should leave this guy alone. He has the Constitution on his side. He has public opinion on his side. There is no discrimination in him. There is faith in him toward a God who has a specific and documented, long-standing view regarding homosexuality. And if they keep pushing this button, they're going to mess around and have folks start talking about bringing back sodomy laws, anti-sodomy laws. And then we're going to have a whole other discussion that nobody really wants to have. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force of internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WBDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3. Final segment of this first hour. Well, I thought we were going to have something very interesting. What do I mean by that? Keith Ellison, who is the deputy chair of the DNC, actually got himself into a real big fix. He had himself messed up, in my opinion. This was actually going to be good. Why? He announced that he was going to give up his congressional seat. He and Tom Perez have provided absolutely no leadership with respect to the Democrats trying to compete in this midterm. They are setting themselves up to be destroyed no matter what happens here. And now all of a sudden, he announced a run for Minnesota State Attorney General. So he was leaving his congressional gig to go be state AG. And then it happened. An ex-girlfriend came up and said that he was a domestic abuser, a domestic violence guy. And I was like, wow, this is different. Why? Because it wasn't the woman herself. It was the woman's son who said that he saw text messages. He had a video. I was like, oh, we got a video. We gonna do this. We gonna do this. And then it turned into some more Me Too nonsense. Here's what I mean. On 13 August, news organization KARE filed this report regarding the whole sordid affair with Keith Ellison, domestic violence abuser.
So Ellison's ex-girlfriend is Karen Monahan, and Saturday her son made a Facebook post describing a video he saw on his mom's computer. He says it shows Ellison dragging his mom off a bed by her feet and screaming profanities at her. Monahan says that's all true. She and Ellison both say they were in a relationship for several years. Monahan has several photos of them together. So yesterday, she tweeted that she met with Ellison in June before he announced his run for Attorney General and told him to get help and heal, which is what she would consider, quote, a just ending to the hell my family and I have been through. For the last several months on Twitter, Monahan referred to herself as a domestic abuse #MeToo survivor without using Ellison's name, but hinting that she was going to tell her story. Monahan has shared screenshots of text messages between her and Ellison, but no evidence of the alleged domestic abuse, and there's no video publicly circulating. Congressman Ellison released a statement that says, Karen and I were in a long-term relationship which ended in 2016, and I still care deeply for her well-being. This video does not exist because I never behaved in this way, and any characterization otherwise is false. Monahan responded to Ellison's statement by tweeting in part, Keith Ellison, you know you did that to me. I have given every opportunity to get help and heal. Monahan turned down our request for an interview, giving us this statement instead. I'm dealing with a family crisis over this right now. I'm trying to take care of my own emotional triggers and be there for my kids. At this time, Ellison has also not agreed to an interview, but his ex-wife, Kim, who's a Minneapolis school board member, released a statement that says, in part, I feel I know him better than anyone else, and the behavior described does not match the character of the Keith I know. We will continue to bring you updates on this story as more information becomes available. It'll be posted right away on KARE11.com as well as our social media pages.
And there you have it. So we're now getting back into the familiar territory in the Ellison domestic abuse allegation story. Chica just wants you to believe her because she says you should believe her. And despite the news that there is a video of Ellison's mistreatment of this woman, Karen Monahan, she told NPR News that she would not be posting the video for many reasons, including that it's traumatizing, humiliating, and here's the good one, sets an expectation that abuse survivors must prove their stories. Well, let me get this straight. Why should I believe your story when you are slandering someone or potentially slandering someone with no evidence? Your son said he had texts. He said that there was video. This was going to be something different. It was going to be something meat. There's going to be some meat on that bone. It was going to be definitive. And as it is, it's just some more she said stuff. How dare anyone request that allegations of abuse and domestic violence, which are criminal acts, by the way, be verified? How could you ever want something like that? Shouldn't we just all agree that if any woman has the temerity to accuse a man of wrongdoing, then her word must by default be the gospel truth? See, that's everything you need to know about this, about the misandry that is at the heart of the #MeToo movement. It's all about valuing a woman's word over a man's word regarding his behavior. And I was all ready with my popcorn. I had butter and everything. And now this is just another, whatever, chick saying something and she ain't got nothing to back it up. I'm going to turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards, and after that we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
Another case of black robes gone wild. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. For today's page from the Edwards Notebook, the Kansas State Legislature recently enacted a law requiring voters to provide proof of citizenship. For years, leftist Democrats found ways to cheat the election process by utilizing dead people and illegal border crossers. After all, when Americans think logically about protecting our sovereignty as paramount, and that voting is the exclusive domain of American-born citizens and legal immigrants who understand and appreciate our constitutionally limited form of government. But, alas, a U.S. District Judge Julie Robinson of Kansas has usurped Kansas lawmakers with a law of her own by striking down the legislatively approved law requiring voters to show their identification. She even lashed out at Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach, who defended the law. The leftist judge ordered Kobach to take continuing education courses because she claimed he did not follow her instructions. Someone please tell me who made the liberal judge Queen of the West, who can overrule legislation and rule on behalf of illegal border crossers and Democrats seeking to undermine our society. Judges need to leave lawmaking to lawmakers. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Fridays on AmericaMatters.us and midnight Sundays on Talk America Radio.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM, North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the other school, or the other foot, drops in the Pennsylvania high school homosexual outrage incident. I dealt with this a while back, but let me just remind you, this is kind of what occurred. And this is from a report back on the 29th of January regarding a high school in Pennsylvania called Emmaus High School.
Controversy in the East Penn School District is getting some national attention.
Videos involving the LGBT community played at Emmaus High School sparked concern and debate between some parents, students, and national organizations. WFMZ's Julia Rose explains.
Videos played by the Gay Straight Alliance Club during Emmaus High School's morning announcements back in April, now in the spotlight. At a school board meeting earlier this month, several parents, community members, and the president of the American Family Association of Pennsylvania voiced their concerns, saying the entire student body was exposed to homosexual and transgender ideals.
Would the school allow the opposite view to be presented to the students?
Emmaus High School student Aiden Levinson says the idea that the videos force the gay lifestyle onto heterosexual students couldn't be further from the truth.
It's more of an anti-bullying effort more than anything else.
Levinson is not a member of the LGBTQ community, but spoke at the school board meeting on Monday, expressing his support for showing the videos. He says the short clips gave kids an inside look at some of the adversity LGBTQ students can face.
Kind of insight into what LGBTQ students experience on a day-to-day basis related to discrimination.
But the American Family Association and the Liberty Council, a nonprofit public policy group, say this is also an issue of parental rights.
Parents were not notified that their children were being shown these videos.
The Liberty Council recently sending the school district a letter requesting it provides the links to the, quote, pro-homosexuality YouTube videos, saying parents, quote, have the right to direct the upbringing and associations of minor children. Julia Rose, 69 News.
What an interesting notion that parents should know anything that you are showing their children on things as controversial or debatable as human sexuality, and that they should be able to know what you're going to show them before you do so. The school came back and said actually that parents should not see this because it was student work product and therefore should be kept away from the public. Seriously? So if students do something in school, their parents are not to know about it. Wow. Okay. The story they want you to go with is that these were just anti-bullying videos. And I actually got, because they finally published all 4 of them after a few months of pushing and shoving, they finally gave up the funk. And in a PJ Media article, 4 months later, school lets parents see one-sided sex and gender pride video it showed to kids. After 4 months, Emmaus High School in Emmaus, Pennsylvania, finally released links to 4 videos it showed students this past spring after a Christian law firm intervened to defend the rights of parents to know what the public school is showing their children. Excuse me, who pays for the public school? I'm sorry? Who pays for the public school? Whose children are in the... Okay. The school had refused to make the videos public, arguing that they were students' private work. Right. Okay. Let me go ahead and play for you the audio of one of those videos. It was actually produced by CBS News. Now, I don't know how many Emmaus, Pennsylvania high school students work for CBS News. And it is called Non-Binary, the gender between he and she. Do you think if you were a parent of a minor child that you would want to know whether or not someone was going to put that information before your children before they did so, or would you want to know after the fact? Well, let's listen to the audio, and if you still haven't made up your mind, maybe this will give you some reason to decide one way or the other.
Some days I would feel extremely masculine, and some days I would feel like extremely feminine, and that's when I started to notice that something was up.
You know, I was proud of her, but I was also worried. As a parent, you worry because you worry that school that people are going to, you know, be very hurtful, and we did have some pretty bad things happen to her.
Sometimes on like the New York subway system, I'll be like waiting for a train, and someone will like realize that I'm in a dress and like tell me I should throw myself on the tracks. Happens like once every other month or so ish.
You know, I still get stares. People still will cross the street so they don't have to walk next to me. It doesn't feel good.
Gender fluid people are not confused. They know exactly who they are. They want to be seen and perceived in a way that may challenge other people's perception. And that's very courageous.
I identify as agender, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs.
I identify as gender fluid, and my pronouns are he or she.
There is more than just boys, girls, men, women. There can be people who live in the spaces between that.
That moment when I found out there was more than two genders, I was like, everything just kind of fell into place and made sense.
The day I found out there were more than two genders, everything fell into place. Yes, you are confused. Anyone who has that idea, you are confused. Gender fluid people are confused. That is not to say that there are not specific biological instances where you have the equivalent of gender fluidity. But in the overwhelming, more than 99.9% of human beings on this planet, there is no such thing. There aren't that many hermaphrodites out there. I'm sorry. If you are born, we can look at you externally as soon as you come out of the womb and tell what gender you are. If we ever do a chromosome test, then we will know whether or not you have a Y chromosome. If you have a Y chromosome, you're a male, period. If you do not have a Y chromosome and all you have is two X chromosomes, then you're female, period. It ain't that hard. But this is what they're putting into the children at school. And you say, well, one of the kids didn't have any problem with it. Do you honestly think by the time you've been in public school and get to high school, this is the first time this type of information has been presented to you? Really? You don't think this has been the product of a number of years of trying to tell children that homosexuality is okay, bisexuality is okay, it's okay for two men to get married and two women to get married. All of this is okay. You think they just started telling them that when they got to high school? The reason this kid, and if you saw if you had taken a look at him in the video, you're like, yeah, you're questionable on your own. But this is indoctrination. This is what they do. And, I'm just going to say it. I want you to take a look at this, or think about this, that the whole thing about that particular video being presented by CBS News was described as student product that parents had no right to see. Let that sink in and ask yourself again, whose kids are these? And now when the school was compelled to allow the parents to see what was going on as this being anti-bullying, no. That kid, whoever it was, the kid said, yeah, it's anti-bullying. No, it's not. It is covert homosexual indoctrination. That's all it is. Now, I've told people for years that any school that has a single union teacher or administrator has no interest in educating children. Rather, their desire is to train children in every godless and anti-family progressive doctrine. Oh, and for grins and giggles, sexually abuse children on a scale that would make the most prolific pedophiles in the Catholic Church blush. And they're going to do all this behind your back and use your money to get away with it. Yet Americans persist in sending their children to these progressive training centers for more time daily than they may get to spend with their children in a month. And then they wonder over time as this continues why their children seem to drift away from their system of beliefs. Are you serious? You don't get it? And even when they catch these public schools, and I say that in air quotes, turning their children's minds away from them, away from faith, away from truth, they accept that, well, we have caring teachers. They accept that nonsense. It's foolishness. It's a lie. They accept that excuse and let the schools continue their 12-year process of separating them from their children and their earnings, and they do it nonstop. They even applaud wealthy, uneducated, passive-aggressive, dang near cross-dressing athletes who open schools. Really? And all they're really doing is adding extra spoonfuls of emotional and financial sugar to the medicine of indoctrination. As they say, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. This is all evil. And so long as parents allow it to go unchallenged or just react to the harm public schools do daily, react to it instead of respond to it, you know, you're more financial accessories to the crime against children and families than you are victims of it. Chattel slavery, bad as it was, it has nothing on the American public education system when it comes to mind control, misinformation, disinformation, and indoctrination. I just wonder when or if that abolition effort might get underway if people are serious about making America great again. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force and internet conservatism, talkamericaradio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM, Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM, North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. I'm calling this segment As It Is in America, So Shall It Be in Australia. I ran across a posting where someone took a Vice.com video of South Sudanese young people discussing how it feels when the media makes you the enemy, and talking about how the media was portraying them in a negative form, how the police were profiling them, how other people, and this is in Australia, South Sudanese immigrants to Australia, how they felt really singled out and put upon because of the racial impressions that were there, how unfair they were, etc. This is all the same thing you hear in the United States, by the way. When people talk about black folks here, it's like, well, they treat us all like criminals. And okay, there's a reason for that. You read the crime statistics, by the way, but never mind. Similar to what you would see in the U.S., Australia has embarked on a campaign to discredit everyone there who would have something negative to say about black immigrants in that country, and of course dismissing it as racism. For example, back in January, 12th of January, Al Jazeera America filed this report on a hashtag that had cropped up called African Gang.
Got to Leah now for something off the grid from Australia. And
Yeah.
I used to live in Melbourne many years ago. This isn't the Melbourne I remember, my goodness.
Yeah, it's not the Melbourne a lot of people know, even the folks that still live there. The Home Affairs Minister, Peter Dutton, he said that people in Melbourne are afraid to go out to restaurants at night because of African gangs. Here's part of his interview with an Australian radio group earlier this week.
The reality is, people are scared to go to restaurants at night time because they're followed home by these gangs, home invasions, and cars are stolen. And we just need to call it for what it is. Of course, it's African gang violence.
So that interview is part of the discussion that fueled the hashtag African gangs on social media. It follows headlines like this of attacks involving black men in the Melbourne area. Now, that's where Makar Mayak comes in. You've never heard of him, but he's South Sudanese living in Australia, and he says his community was on the receiving end of racist comments and bullying after media reports of gang violence. Then once Dutton said people were too afraid to go out at night, Mayak decided to change the meaning behind that hashtag altogether. He started by calling himself the African gang on his Twitter page.
Over the years, our own stories have been told by other people, so we decided to take that initiative and tell our own stories. We're extremely grateful to the Australian people who've come out and supported the campaign. We knew when we had suspected it all along, Australians do not endorse these sensational headlines by politicians aimed at, particularly Liberal Party politicians aimed at political point scoring. Australians are happy with their multicultural society, but the politicians in this country do not seem to understand this.
Now, hashtag African gangs is being used to show how educated, vibrant, and diverse Australia's African communities are. Now, people are posting pictures on Twitter like this using the hashtag African gangs. This woman saying half African gangs graduated and traveled overseas to make a difference in vulnerable people's lives. Or this one, hashtag my mini African gang taking care of her business in the grocery store. And the University of Adelaide's Dean of Law ain't afraid to take pics with hashtag African gang graduates. Victoria's Police Department has taken notice. They've formed a task force with police and senior African Australian leaders in the community to help tackle the problems from both sides of this discussion. Many are now also posting pictures with the hashtag Melbourne Bites back, showing how they're still eating out at night as normal without any fear. If you're in Australia, especially in Melbourne, we want to hear from you. Tell us what you think about this story and how it's impacted you, if it has at all, with the hashtag AJ Newsgrid.
So the normal nonsense that comes from the left that is trying to romanticize and cleanse the relationship, cleanse the image of blacks, because the only reason you think poorly of blacks in Australia or in America or anywhere else is because you think all of them are criminals. Now, here in the United States, you have to remember blacks are 13% of the population, yet they commit 26 to 28% of all violent crime. Blacks commit 52% of all murders in the U.S. But to think of blacks as criminal or homicidal is racist. How you get there, I do not know. It is called fantasy land. So what is going on in Australia with respect to the South Sudanese? You just heard, hey, here's this guy, we want to change the image, we want to get up here. All the political correctness is coming out. But let me help you out with something. Because in that video that Vice put out, one of the things they said in the at the beginning of the article is that these young people, we identify, we stand with the victims of all these crimes. That is what made my ears stand up. What crimes? What victims? Excuse me? What are you talking about? So I went and I took a look at the statistics. I applied the same logic that I applied to America regarding black people to Australia and the South Sudanese. This is what I learned. In Australia, the Sudanese are 0.11% of the population. That is 1/9 of 1%. Yet they are responsible for 4.8% of aggravated burglaries. They are responsible for 7.44% of home invasions. They are responsible for 5.65% of car thefts, and they are responsible for 13.9% of aggravated robberies. One report said they are 44 times more likely than other Australians to engage in crime. So help me understand again how this is racism. I mean, here's what there's only one way to say it. Of every 900 people in Australia, one is Sudanese. Yet you're responsible for all this crime? That much crime? And you wonder why people, when they see you, they're a little bit nervous? Because the likelihood is much greater than when they see anybody else that you're going to do something to them that is criminal. That's not racism. It's not a racist response. It is self-protection. So, how bad is it there? As part of the, there's an election campaign that's ongoing. One side is promoting a law and order policy, including mandatory sentencing. They want mandatory sentencing for repeat offenders of home invasions, armed robberies, and aggravated carjackings. South Sudanese Australian Nellie Yoa, who mentors troubled Sudanese people, young people in the community, criticized the current response to criminality in the South Sudanese community. The punishments are not harsh enough. Wow. That's a Sudanese person saying that. And then, of course, there are the apologists. There's one gentleman, Ahmad Hassan, who directs an organization that helps marginalized young people. And he said the proportions of African youth involved in crime was a small minority. We don't have an African gang problem. What we do have is young people who are disadvantaged, disengaged, a young cohort who are coming together that are causing this mischievous activity? Wow, mischievous, I guess. That sounds verbatim to me like the deflections that come from defenders of the negrosity in America that causes the high crime rate with respect to blacks in my country. It's not everybody, it's just a few. They commit crimes because they're disadvantaged. The people, the police, they target us because their profile is because of our skin color. This is foolishness. They come for you because you come for everybody else. And it's really quite simple. When a disproportionate amount of crime comes from a particular community, reasonable people take notice and responsible people take measures to protect themselves. And, not surprisingly, they're going to criticize the community responsible for the crime. And a dishonest person will defend their unreasonableness and irresponsibility and disingenuousness when they call the response unfair. Well, you guys are being unfair. You will defend that with a cloak of race. As it is in America, so shall it be in Australia, and likely anywhere else where black crime significantly outstrips black population density. That is how negrosity works, folks. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let's discuss the black racism, obvious, blatant racism of black Democrats. We know that, for example, we've seen the racism of, say, Maxine Waters. We've seen the racism, and not even being willing to sit down and talk with Donald Trump, of the Clown Brown Council, which some people call the Congressional Black Caucus. And we've also seen the most interesting thing is that the black population of the United States, almost across the board, accepts this behavior as okay. It's okay if black people are racist. Matter of fact, we won't even call them to task. We're not going to make them accountable for it. We're not going to do anything about it. And then we have a case where it is so blatant that you would think there would be more reaction to it, but not exactly. And I'm speaking of, in this case, Detroit Representative Betty Cook Scott. Now, before I tell you this, I want you to understand that this woman is a mess. She, in 2017, she was $20,000 behind in rent and battling evictions. And she had used so many addresses over the years, it was really tough to tell where she actually lived. And she still hasn't gotten that resolved, by the way. But she's running for office, and she was running against a young lady. Her name was Stephanie Chang, or is Stephanie Chang, and she's a state rep. They're both running for a state senate seat in a primary, I believe. And Scott is alleged to have referred to Chang as Ching Chang and the Ching Chong to multiple voters outside polling precincts during the election. While the election was going on, she also said to one of Chang's campaign volunteers, she called them an immigrant, saying, "You don't belong here. I want you out of my country." This is on election day. Wow. They're running in the Democrat Party for the State Senate District 1. Now, Chang won the election with 49% of the vote, and Scott came in third with 11%. That's not even the point. She went off. She also got on Chang's husband. Stephanie Chang's husband happens to be a black man named Sean Gray. And he says that he overheard Cook disparaging his wife outside a precinct on the east side of Detroit. And he said, "I asked her not to speak about my wife in that manner. At that time, she said to the voter that these immigrants from China are coming over here and taking our community from us." Further, she said it disgusts her seeing black people holding signs for Asians and not supporting their own people. And Scott also, according to Gray, went on to call him a fool for marrying Chang. Does it get any more blatant than that? Does it get any more? Now, she lost, and she lost badly. Her response to this is interesting. Here we go. At another precinct, she said, "Thanks for voting for me. You don't need to vote for that Ching Chang." My goodness. As an African-American woman, I've been called the N-word before in my life, and you never forget it, and that was someone who actually overheard her. Each time it's shocking and appalling and disgusting. So when you hear someone that's a minority and a woman using slurs against another minority that's a woman, it's just mind-boggling. No, it's not. Perhaps you have forgotten there was a 2013 Rasmussen poll that polled Americans and found out that everybody was in agreement that the most racist demographic in the country were black Americans, and even black Americans thought that blacks were the most racist folks in America. Now, when you put that together with black females, my goodness, left-leaning black females are toxic individuals. I'll just say it. I'll get in trouble for it. I don't care. If you are a left-leaning black female, I am not surprised if you are single. I'll just say it. Because a reasonable man doesn't need that drama. And that's all you guys tend to bring sometimes, particularly when you get up in your feelings. However, a lot of people got on Ms. Cook Scott about her remarks, so much to the point where she offered an apology. I want you to hear how WXYZ in Detroit covered the apology that was offered up by Betty Cook Scott after her disparaging remarks about her primary opponent.
6 racially charged comments. Tonight, one state lawmaker is apologizing to another, but does it fall short?
Representative Betty Cook Scott says she's sorry for saying negative things about opponent Stephanie Chang and Asians during the primary election.
But 7 Action News reporter Simon Chowdhury tells us the apology leaves some scratching their heads tonight.
Mudslinging can be common during heated political elections, but some say one candidate went too far.
Never before had I heard comments that were so offensive.
State Representative Stephanie Chang is shocked after learning that State Representative Betty Cook Scott made derogatory comments about immigrants and used racial slurs against Chang and Asian Americans. This happened at polling locations on primary day.
Sorry, and I apologize.
Representative Scott agreed to an interview, although she didn't answer many questions with anything other than an apology to her constituents. Why would you make comments like this?
I just repeat that, I'm sorry.
At one point, she denies the comments were racist.
When there's an election cycle, sometimes there's adverse opinions.
So what exactly are you apologizing for if you're saying you didn't say anything that was racist?
I'm apologizing for what someone or people said.
She didn't really apologize directly to Representative Chang, but her lawyer says she will when they're face-to-face. Representative Chang won the primary by a wide margin. Many organizations are calling out Representative Scott. Some say she needs to step down. That includes Representative Chang's husband, who says he heard some of the comments made by Scott at a polling place.
I can't accept an apology for something you did for 12 hours. It wasn't a slip.
Now, both representatives plan to meet next Thursday afternoon. We asked if we could join them in that meeting, but we were told it's going to be closed to the media. In Detroit, Simon Chowdhury, 7 Action News.
Yeah, that is someone's idea of an apology, not mine. And now, of course, if Donald Trump doesn't say a racial thing, if someone attributes a comment to him, as Dick Durbin did with the fecal void countries comment, then everyone's demanding an apology of Donald Trump, even though no one can state unequivocally that he said those words. However, we have all these witnesses to Ms. Betty Scott Cook being extremely racial and disparaging towards someone, and you know what I don't hear? I don't hear any of those stalwart anti-racism Negro organizations, KNEE-GROW, stepping in to check her on this ratchet behavior. The National Aggregation of African Complaint Personnel, also known as the NAACP, they're silent. Sharpton's organization ain't said nan a word. Jackson's tired organization just kept it pushing. And the DNC are as quiet as church mice. Of course, this is not a national race, and also their deputy chairman has his own problems right now. Here's the bottom line. Progressive Negroes, especially the female of the species, are the most blatant racists that of whom I'm aware. And they really don't care who knows about it. And they will go so far as to openly practice the very thing of which they will complain if whites do it. And they never believe they are in the wrong. I have never, ever in my life heard a leftist female, black female, apologize. As close as I've come is what you heard from Betty Scott Cook, which is nothing. Now, she's going to be shocked that she lost. She just doesn't understand why people wouldn't vote for her. She's going to go back to her eviction court battle. And if she does try to claim racism as the reason that she lost, she might actually be right. She just wouldn't be wrong about whose racism it was. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, talkamericaradio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, let's just briefly, because I don't want to put too much time into this, talk about the Onerous Odyssey of Omarosa Manigault, whatever her last name is now. As you know, she was recently fired from the Trump administration after being there for a year and doing or accomplishing who knows what. It is rumored, at least, that she had something to do with the gathering of HBCU presidents to speak with Donald Trump And the photo op that happened in the office, at least she was there. There's rumors that she had something to do with that, and I can acknowledge that she did. So she set up a meeting. Not much came of that. Aside from that, the only thing you ever heard were the normal things that you heard from Omarosa. Now, of course, Omarosa hit everybody in the nation as a national entity, for lack of a better word, back in 2004 with the first season of Apprentice. She was fired in week 9. The show went on for 14 weeks. And there's only really one way to describe this. She was on that show one of the most horrendous human beings that I could ever imagine. She never accomplished anything on Apprentice. She was fired in week 9. She was a project manager or program manager one time, a project manager one time, and she lost. And of course she was fired, but her ability to alienate, to purposely needle and just be, I believe what Pierce Morgan said, she is the worst human being that has ever been born. And when you see her antics, you can understand that. The one thing I will give her after looking, and I spent time looking at her over the years, back in 2004, then on a Celebrity Apprentice some years later, and going on up till now, she's filled out a little bit. She's a little bit, she's not as thin as she was back in 2004. I'm not saying that to be a bad thing. It's just a change. She's actually, from the neck down, a very attractive woman. The other thing that seems to have changed is she has mellowed. And that's only an outward approach. The venom is still there. And underneath the surface, there's just a slightly thicker surface, as evidenced in this CBS News interview on the 15th of August on the morning show, where she is out there promoting her book and defending the things that she's trying to say about the president.
Omarosa Manigault-Newman is with us in Studio 57. Her new memoir, Unhinged, is published by a division of Simon & Schuster, which is owned by CBS. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start with the tape. You said you had done some taping when you were fired to protect yourself. But this is during the campaign.
Absolutely.
Why are you taping things in the middle of a campaign?
The moment we started talking about the N-word tape, I was surprised, as you heard on that recording, how no one doubted that he said it. And in fact, they had worked to try to suppress this tape for so long. And everyone says, he said it, he's embarrassed, he doesn't want this to come out. And now they're saying they have never heard these allegations. And it's ironic that these are high-level campaign staffers talking about how to react.
About why you were taping. I'm curious too about why were you taping?
Because the truth matters, Gail. And in fact, if I didn't have this tape, you all would probably wondering if in fact they did talk about it. She mentions Kellyanne on the tape and says that she talked to Kellyanne, or Kellyanne discussed this with the President of the United States. And now he's tweeting at me saying that he never said it, it's not in his vocabulary, when he discussed this on Trump Force One during the campaign.
But stepping back from the specifics of the tape, the question with everything you're saying and you're coming forward, you were taping during the campaign.
Oh, yeah.
There is this question about your credibility and the fact that you were kind of already taping things and working behind the scenes during the campaign. My father had an expression, we can't hear you because your actions are speaking more loudly. Why are people supposed to pay attention to what you're saying now when you're the kind of person who would be taping campaign press conference or phone calls in the middle of the campaign?
Yes, I'm the kind of person who covers her own back. In Trump world, everyone lies. Everyone says one thing one day and they change their story the next day. I wanted to have this type of documentation so that in the event I found myself in this position where, as you said, they're questioning my credibility, saying they never discussed the N-word tape, they had never heard these accusations, the president had never heard these accusations, when in fact this tape proves that they discussed it at high levels of the Trump campaign.
Well, Frank Lentz reached out to me because you said he had heard it. He said you never called him, emailed him.
No, I didn't. In fact, the book says that Katrina...
He said, I've never heard the president use that word.
Well, it's important. In Unhinged, I never say that I spoke to him. Katrina Pearson, the spokesperson for the Trump campaign, says on that recording that she communicated with him and that he had heard it. I speak very clearly in this chapter about what happened between Katrina and Frank Luntz. He's absolutely right. I never spoke to him, never reached out to him. I was simply reporting what was on the tape.
He says it's not true. But why do you want to work in a world, as you say, where everybody lies? Why do you want to be?
Well, I've been in politics for 20 years. Everybody lies in politics. I worked in the Clinton administration during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, where he first said he never had relations with her, and we found out that that was a lie. I learned very early on in politics that this is a cutthroat world, and you have to be tough. 20 years in politics, and I've learned some lessons. Number one, you have to look out for yourself. And two, things change, relationships change, and people always protect themselves. You have to look out for yourself.
Omarosa, there are conflicting reports as to when you first heard the tape where the president allegedly uses the N-word. There are reports that you heard this last year while you were still working in the administration.
I did hear it last year.
When did you first hear it?
I did not hear it until after I closed the book, and I had an opportunity to fly out to California, and the person allowed me to hear it. Had I heard it while I was working in the White House, I would have left immediately.
So let's say the tape exists. Now what? What is the purpose of? So the tape comes out, we hear it. What do you hope will come out of this?
Well, the sad thing is, as we saw with Access Hollywood, it probably won't impact his base. I think that their support is baked in, but it does expose him for the racist that he is.
You also said that you and the president in your book have a symbiotic relationship, that you two used each other. What is the nature of your relationship, Omarosa? There's all sorts of rumors about you and Donald Trump. Can you tell us what was the nature of your relationship? I know you're happily married. I just met your husband backstage. Very nice.
My very handsome, smart, talented husband, John Allen Newman.
But what is the nature of your relationship?
Donald Trump was my mentor, Gail. He was my mentor for many, many years. And, in 2003, I wanted to be like him. I grew up in extreme poverty in Youngstown, Ohio. And I aspired to be a billionaire one day. And what better way to become a billionaire than to study under a billionaire?
The two of you never had a romantic relationship?
Absolutely
ever?
not.
Well, you've heard that rumor, I'm sure.
Well, that's a charge that's launched against successful women to kind of degrade them and undermine their success. I'm very well educated. I have incredible experience, and I have never had to leverage sex to get anywhere I needed to go.
So what do you hope will come out of all of this?
I think the truth matters, and I believe that we should keep the truth as a priority. In this administration, they struggle with the truth, and they construct their own reality, deceiving the American people.
Very quickly, you have everything that you say in the book backed up by tape or email?
Absolutely. If you see it in quotes, it can be verified, corroborated, and is well documented.
And you keep it almost feels like a form of blackmail with the tapes. Either release the tapes.
I'm not asking for anything. I'm telling my story unhinged. I'm telling my story unhinged. If you get the book, you see the quotes, it is backed up and verified.
Omarosa, we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That is Omarosa Manigault Jennings, or whatever her name is now, is a liar. She's always been a liar. If you ever watched The Apprentice, you knew she was a liar just watching her interact with the other contestants. As far as her not using sex to get anywhere, Piers Morgan made it very clear that on his first encounter with her on Celebrity Apprentice, she suggested that the two of them have sex and somehow use that storyline to make money for the both of them. So the fact that he didn't give in to that demand or that suggestion, I guess that means she didn't use sex to get anywhere. Here is the problem with Omarosa telling me how educated she is and how much experience she has. What has she ever done? Her only tie to success, as it were, was Donald Trump. Donald Trump kept her around. Donald Trump kept resurrecting her, pulling her out of the ashes. I think with respect to The Apprentice, despite the fact that she was never going to win anything, she was simply good television. Why he drug her into the White House as anything is, well, we'll have to figure that out somewhere down the line. But this is a woman who's gone from place to place talking about her accomplishments, which I don't know what they are. Her success, I have no idea what it is. The only thing she has ever done, of which I'm aware, is somehow have a good relationship with Donald Trump. That's over now. And the idea that Donald Trump is now a racist when he was your mentor since 2003, so you were knowingly mentored by a racist. Because Donald Trump hasn't changed. And the truth is, neither has she. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and also FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. I ran across something this week, a sermon, if you will, or part of a sermon, if you will, from a church in Atlanta, Cascade United Methodist Church, pastored by Dr. Kevin Muriel, Reverend Dr. Kevin Muriel. And it was the best example of why the black church is worthless right now. Listen to this tirade, and then you tell me how this is supposed to help black people or anyone else.
So had they asked me, I would have said, before you praise this president for being pro-black, before you praise this president for caring about ethnic communities and marginalized populations, do your homework. Well, some of y'all didn't do your homework. They didn't do their homework. So let me tell you just a little bit of research, not just him personally, but also some of his policies. Perhaps before they went and sat at this table, they should have done their homework. Because if they had done their homework, they would have known that President Trump has ramped up mass incarceration by instructing Attorney General Jeff Sessions to revitalize the war on drugs. They would have known that of the 87 picks for federal judges, 85 have been white and just one has been black and one has been Hispanic. They would have known that President Trump supported the Department of Justice engaging in unlawful voter purges, making it difficult for blacks to go and vote. They would have known that Trump is ending protection for predatory lenders, which disproportionately harm black people. They would have known that he is ignoring the affordable housing crisis by ordering HUD to triple the rents of poor tenants in public housing, which mostly affect black people. Do your homework. They would have known that he is proposing cutting $200 billion over the next 10 years from supplemental nutrition assistance programs that will bring more hunger in black and brown communities. They would have known that Trump is worsening the health of black communities through environmental deregulation, which disproportionately harms black people through exposure to pollution. Now, that's just a few on the policy side, but you don't have to go too far to ask what about him personally would make me know that he is not pro-black. I'm glad you asked, because in 1970, Trump's real estate company tried to avoid renting apartments to black tenants and gave preferential treatment to white tenants. He began his 2016 presidential campaign with a speech disparaging Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists. Y'all remember that? In 2016, he said of people of color, you are living in poverty, your schools are no good, you have no jobs. Hold on, I'm a product of HBCU, and I'm a product of black school systems and black teachers. Don't you ever tell me that my black schools are... Hold on, I ain't done. He says you have no jobs, so what do you have to lose from electing me? In 2017, Trump said 15,000 recent immigrants from Haiti all have AIDS, and 40,000 Nigerians once seeing the United States would want to go back to their huts in Africa. He spent years suggesting that the nation's first black president was not a citizen of these United States. He called Puerto Ricans who's criticized his administration's response to Hurricane Maria, he called them politically motivated ingrates. Hold on, but he called those who marched beside white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia, he called them very fine people. He hired Steve Bannon, a white nationalist, as his chief strategist. He called Haiti and other African nations S-hole countries, and he's taking credit for an economy that has not been built on his administration, but was built on the backs of 8 years of hard work under the Obama administration. Negroes, please, don't you come up in here talking about this is the most pro-black president that you have ever seen when the record suggests that he cares nothing about people of color.
Let's deal with some of that, shall we? Start with the economy. Barack Obama never had an economy that hit 3% his last year in office, 3% GDP growth. The last year in office, only 1.9%. Donald Trump's first year is 2.6%. I don't think you build that type of relative success on relative failure. The only person who ever called immigrant countries fecal voids was Dick Durbin. No one else ever said that publicly except those who were listening to Dick Durbin. He said he was proud of Jackson State. Well, you know what? Let me make sure I understand what you're proud of. You're proud of a place that ranks between 231 to 300 in national universities. I went to a school that ranked number 34. I guess you couldn't get in there. Both for public schools. Your fall acceptance rate, everybody gets into Jackson State. 7 out of 10 get in. Only 1 out of 4 get into Georgia Tech. A little bit more discriminating, I guess. And then over at Jackson State, you guys don't graduate anybody. Less than 20% of the people who go in graduate in 4 years. Wow. A little bit high. More than twice that comes out at Georgia Tech, and they make more money. So you can be proud of Jackson State if you want to. I'm not worried about that. Now, as far as the housing discrimination suit, Donald Trump's not the only New York landlord who ever got sued for housing discrimination, and all of them were sued with regard to blacks for the same reason. They found out that on average, blacks in their housing developments didn't pay the rent. That's one of the reasons Donald Trump got out of that business and just went into high-end properties. Didn't want to deal with it. So I'm trying to listen to this stuff. What about you talked about you're talking about ending protection for predatory lenders? Do you want to protect predatory lenders, or did you ever teach your flock to not get involved in predatory loans? Did you do that? Oh, you didn't. How is he ignoring affordable housing when his infrastructure plan would directly increase the supply of affordable housing if enacted? He can't enact it on himself. Unlawful voter purges? The Supreme Court just upheld the Ohio law of purging voters from their rolls who did not participate. And that gave a green light to everyone else. Where's the illegality? As far as mass incarceration, I'm sorry, that's caused by mass criminality. Are you teaching your people not to commit crime? And in that whole more than 3.5-minute tirade, since this was a church service, where was Jesus' name mentioned? That's why the black church is not worth a bucket of warm spit right now, relatively speaking. If you're going to sit up there and spend all day long railing against somebody you don't know and not talking about the God that you do, you're a waste of space. And that's what a great number of so-called black ministers are, and this one obviously falls in that category. And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you. Hope to see you next week. Do better than the people you hear criticizing folks they don't know. And until next time, do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.